Pleased to welcome in now Jason Bryant, the founder of Matt Talk Online. Jason, how are you this morning?
Digging myself out of about almost a foot of snow here in Minnesota, so just call it a typical Tuesday.
I mean, we had a bunch of snow back in Jersey just a couple weeks ago, and it was, believe me, we were digging out of maybe about 2 feet, so definitely a challenge, but definitely a typical day for you. Let's just get right into it. We'll start off with Rutgers Wrestling, obviously. They're coming off a tough loss to Nebraska over the weekend. Penn State's next on the schedule, and, that's no easy task. Penn State ranked number one right now, and number one guys across the board. This Rutgers team is obviously missing Anthony Ashnault, and they've had some inconsistency at the upper weight. So, in your mind, how do you rank this Rutgers team so far this year, and what do you make of their results so far?
Well, I think with the coaches poll that gets released, actually, as we talk on the phone right now, they're coming in at number 18. That's probably where they're at as far as a dual meet team ranking. You look up and down the lineup, you've got Suriano's the super stud, but when you look at the rankings, you're anywhere between 11 and 15 for guys like Nick Gravina, Elazar DeLucas. So as a dual meet team, you're going to have those up and down type of results. But when the postseason hits, we'll see if Richie Lewis can hit his stride. He's only got 2 losses all year. They're to the same guy, Alex Marinelli from Iowa. And you kind of follow Richie's progression based on how Marinelli progresses. He's a redshirt freshman out of Iowa, so we don't really know how good he is yet because he hasn't hit those hammers. So I guess as Marinelli rises in the rankings, Lewis will kind of follow based on his 2 losses. Suriano, of course, the unanimous number one for most of the ranking services. Actually, that's what unanimous means is all of them. But, I'd say the results for guys like Suriano's not surprising. We knew how good he was. I mean, you don't go through the state of New Jersey with the type of credentials that he did in high school without being able to have that type of success on the next level. But, I think there were some high expectations. If you throw Ashnault in there, you may be looking at maybe a top 10 type of team ranking in dual meets. But come tournament time, those guys that are sitting in that 12, 13, 14 range are going to be right there knocking on the door for All-American honors. So, it might be a little disappointing in terms of on paper, but it's the nature of college wrestling. Everybody's getting better. The depth is better than it's ever been. The Big Ten is the meat grinder of Division I wrestling. So I think some fans are expecting, every year in, year out, you've got to be top 5, top 10. That's hard even for the best programs. There's only about 4 or 5 programs that do that traditionally. So to go beyond, the Iowas, the Penn States, the Oklahoma States of the world, and now the Ohio States, it takes a tradition to make that happen. So I'm not too disappointed in terms of what we expect to see with Rutgers right now. It's just, they're kids. They're still kids. They're getting better. And wrestling is not an easy sport. It's not like you can be 100% of the time.
Now, you mentioned Richie Lewis and Nick Suriano. Let's start out with Lewis first. They seem like the 2 best shots for Rutgers to get All-Americans this year. Maybe throw in Nick Gravina later in March as well. But sticking with Richie Lewis right here, he's now adjusted to 165 after making the bump earlier in the year. He's knocked off Anthony Valencia, and he just beat his Isaiah White over the weekend. And as you mentioned before, his only 2 losses this year are to Alex Marinelli. But do you ultimately see him on the podium in March, and how deep do you think he can go?
I think he's got a real good shot because what Richie Lewis brings to the table is something that I think a lot of Jersey wrestling fans are aware of. It's something that's very traditional and almost part of the wrestling culture there in New Jersey, and it's swagger. Now, Richie Lewis has a confidence about himself. People say that athletes can be cocky but not confident. No, Richie Lewis is both, man. So he'll bring that to the table. It's kind of a fearless attitude. Like, he takes a loss, he's gonna brush off his shoulder and be like, all right, I got you next time. He's tenacious, and in adjusting to the weight, yeah, it would be really cool to see him be a title threat. Or Jason Nolf's there at 157, so to say he would be a title threat might be a reach in some fans' eyes. But at 57, he would have been probably a real threat to make the finals, finish top 4. And at 65, settling into that weight again, there's things that you can teach with technique, but he's got that swagger. And then sometimes it's about attitude. So I think the ceiling for him, he can definitely make a run. That's a tough weight. I mean, it is a tough weight, and he's got to clear that Marinelli hurdle because I don't think Marinelli right now is going to be challenging those guys for a national championship just yet. Probably the later part of his career. We're talking about a freshman here, but Lewis, and he's wrestled at the national tournament in terms of the junior college level at Iowa Central, so he's seen high-level competition. He won a U23 World Championship, so he knows how to win, and he's got that swagger. So that might be that X factor for him really placing high this year.
Now, let's switch over to Nick Suriano. Now, in light of Spencer Lee's upset of Nathan Tomasello, Suriano, as you mentioned, also was named the unanimous number 1 in all of the polls. Do you think that is the right choice by everybody? I mean, I know there was arguments for Darian Cruz, even though Suriano beat him last year, but he is the defending champion. I mean, so I even saw some people that argued for Spencer Lee to be number one at this point. But do you think everybody was right in making Suriano the unanimous number one for this week?
Having done rankings for a long, long time, I'm not in that game anymore, but a lot of it varies on opinion. I think there's a definite case for Nick Suriano to be number one. There's a definite case for Darian Cruz to be number one because, wrestling fans know that the All-Star Classic is an unofficial bout. It does not count on your record. And some people have a different mindset of what that particular bout means for Cruz. Would he have tried to go across on a suicide cradle in that position if it was the NCAA finals or a semifinal or a dual meet to try to win the match? And that's all conjecture in terms of, the mind of an athlete. The loss is the loss, but it doesn't count. The NCAA seeding rankings aren't supposed to use it for their coaches' panel rankings. All the media polls are free to use it whatever they want. But I think when you're arguing Suriano versus Cruz, you can go back to last year and know that Suriano had that big win when he was wrestling for Penn State. But Darian Cruz went through a minefield of the postseason. And kid, it is something about when you win and you place high, you start wrestling like it. You see that jump between a wrestler who's not an All-American, then they place fifth or sixth that next year. Then they wrestle like a fifth or sixth guy all year. Darian Cruz has been wrestling like a national champion, save an exhibition match all year. So it would be really, really cool if Rutgers was still in the EIWA and we would see that at conference time. But we have to wait to see that potentially at nationals. Hopefully we see it again. And I think it is a Cruz-Suriano argument for number one. I can definitely see having the All-Star Classic play a role. I mean, it's a loss in a lot of people's eyes, but there's still a zero next to Cruz's loss record officially. So I would lean towards Suriano right now for sure. But Cruz, I mean, he hasn't lost an official bout, and he's a returning champ. I mean, the guy seems to be a little bit disrespected by some people. I think he feels.
Well, let's move on to the NCAA, just to go around the horn here. 141 is a very stacked weight class. Bryce Meredith seems like he's the man to beat after knocking off Dean Heil, and even Kevin Jack knocked him off recently. You even look at Meredith took a super match with Seth Gross, who was bumping up from 133. What do you ultimately think of this weight class? Because we know, I mean, at least out here at Rutgers, we know in years past how stacked this weight class is because, we're covering Anthony Ashnault. He has a chance for a title, it seems like, every year. But as you mentioned, minefield, it seems like 141 is the biggest minefield of all these weight classes.
Minefield could be one way to put it. As far as depth, I mean, you've got a kid that comes out of high school, Yanni Doc-Mihalis from Cornell, and comes out and makes a tremendous splash. Dean Heil, he's lost twice this year, but he's still a guy that knows how to win. People look at, he's lost twice, he's not going to do that. Ohio State had a guy a couple years ago, actually probably 10 years ago at this time, named Jay Jaggers. He was a two-time national champion. Won it as a junior. His senior year, he took a lot of losses, and he got hot at the right time and then wins the NCAA title with, I think, 5 or 6 losses on his record. So, I'm not worried about Dean Heil. Jaden Ironman, dangerous with his funk work, and he does things non-traditionally. So, minefield, probably a good thing. And then there's good depth. I think there's 5, 6, 7 guys that could win this weight. Nick Lee at Penn State as a true freshman has really started to turn some heads. And guys that are really unknowns, like Mason Smith from Central Michigan, Brock Zachor from Clarion, they're dangerous guys because they haven't seen those hammers. They're not in those power conferences. But which is also interesting, look at the weight class here. You got a Big 12, non-power traditional team in Wyoming, an ACC team. You got Cornell. You got where's the next Big Ten guy? It's Nick Lee at number 8, according to Flo's ranking. So it's not just like the minefield of the Big Ten. You're right. I'm talking in circles because I can't really even point out who's going to win this thing.
He is Jason Bryant, founder of Matt Talk Online. You can follow him on Twitter at Jason M. Bryant. Jason, you mentioned Nick Lee, and that actually brings me to Penn State. They have a couple of returning champions. They seem to be the number 1 team right now. And it looks like, based on their lineup and looking at the tournament ahead in March, I know it's a long way away, but you look at Rutherford, you look at Nolf, they seem to have the inside track to repeating. But what do you make of the challenges to Vincenzo Joseph, Mark Hall, and Bo Nickel? I mean, they're also returning champions, but do you think out of those 3, who do you think has the best chance of repeating, and who are your biggest challengers to some of those guys?
You put those 3. I think Bo Nickel's probably your best chance of repeating, knowing how good Zahid Valencia is at 174 and how Mark Hall and he are really, there's a razor-thin difference between the two in terms of who can win one day, who can win the next. Vincenzo Joseph, I think he's jumped levels. I think last year it caught a lot of people by surprise outside of maybe Pennsylvania that he was able to beat Isaiah Martinez in the finals and do it in the manner which he did. And this year he's just looked again, he's wrestled like a national champion all year. I mean, he feels like that he's the man, and he goes out there and deserves. So I think him and Aymar, and then Hall and Valencia are two of those where I was like, man, which one's more likely to win? It's hard to say. I think that's where I think Bo Nickel, who has had success over Miles Martin at Ohio State, another past national champion at the weight class, and let's not forget 184's also got some depth to it as well. So there's very, very thin margins. I'd say Nickel's probably the most likely to repeat of those three, followed by Hall and then Joseph. But again, the difference between those selections is very microscopic.
Just a couple more here, then we will let you go. I saw the NCAA has done away with those NWCA duels, the postseason duels after the season is over, right before the conference tournaments. It's at least on hold for this year. I mean, did you like it last year? I mean, personally, we loved it because it was kind of like almost like a bowl game if you're going to equate it to football. If you liked it, are there any ways you think the NCAA can improve these types of dual meets, or do you think they're going to be on hold for the time being?
It looks like they're going to be on hold for the time being. And just for full disclosure, I do the press releases and coordinate the national rankings for the NWCA. So, and I used to work for them for 3 years out when I lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So that being said, I love the national duels. I wish we as a sport could have a little bit more of an understanding that we're so almost like insulated from other sports. We look at other sports and, we don't really seem to have a whole lot of paying attention. Look, why is college basketball successful? With March Madness. I mean, it's an event. It's an icon. Everything's building towards that. Yeah, March is what matters in wrestling, but we get to a situation where our sport ends up with a really great, fantastic, iconic event like the NCAA championships. But how do you score it? That's the one thing as a wrestling fan. I didn't discover wrestling until 1995, and I went to a dual meet to do it. It took me an hour and a half to understand the sport of wrestling. 2 days later, I'm at another big dual meet tournament event. I can follow my team, my high school. So I like the dual meet advancement concept. I think it can really engage a fan base. It can bring – I was a new fan once. I'm that, who knows who the next guy that's going to be out there becomes a wrestling junkie because they discover wrestling in a 2-hour setting with crazy fans and a matte light and loud music. It's kind of hard to do that when you've got to sit in the gym for 8 hours a day and wondering, what are advancement points? So he's a half a point for the consolation. Wait, why is it pin 6 in a dual meet and 2 in a tournament? I think those type of nuanced things make our wrestling fans super knowledgeable about the sport, but it's kind of insular. We don't really get it. It's hard for an outsider to come into the community, be accepted, and understand the sport. So for that reason, I really like what a dual meet concept can do. I like creating the season to mean something. Chattanooga and Gardner-Webb, that dual meet should mean something for your conference championship to qualify for the end of the year. I think athletic directors like it because there's a Directors Cup thing. They're looking for it. I mean, you got one kid that places, he wins a championship, you can finish 16th in the country. Okay, is there an I in team? Apparently, there is in wrestling, where you could go 2-14 in dual meets and finish third in the country. I like the dual meet advancement concept. I just wish we as a sport could get on the same page. But we've got 77 personalities with 77 different mindsets when it comes to Division I wrestling, and I don't think we'll ever get on the same page of that. I like our tournament the way it is, but I also love the fact that a dual meet is 10. Your best 10 versus my best 10. Let's go.
Now, basically, the biggest matchup of the season at the end of the year is probably going to be Penn State and Ohio State. They are 1 and 2. Based on the matchups at full strength, I personally think Ohio State can win this match and very close. How do you ultimately think this plays out near the end of February?
I think it's the same record we've heard from Penn State over and over. It's going to come down to bonus points. And you've got 5 national champions, bang, 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 and they win and they score big points. So Ohio State has to mitigate the bonus points and win where they're supposed to win. I mean, and their seniors are going to have to step up. A guy like Bo Jordan's going to have to step up. He's beaten Mark Hall once. He's going to have to do it again. Kyle Snyder, I don't think it's going to be a problem him scoring bonus points. But, Colin Moore is the same way. But who's Penn State going to throw out at 97? You got a guy that likes cross-face cradles, and you got a guy that's had shoulder injuries that are both capable of winning. So Ohio State's got everybody ranked in their lineup, but they don't put up the bonus points, save Kyle Snyder, that we see to contend. So I think it's you get a pin, that's like an extra win for Penn State. So I still think Penn State, even with their holes at 25 and the somewhat hole at 33, Keener's a serviceable guy, but he hasn't stepped up and shown he's an All-American contender this year just yet. So I like Penn State just on gut feeling. I haven't analyzed the dual weight by weight, but again, sometimes winners win. And both teams know how to win, but Penn State hasn't been beaten 40 straight dual meets. I mean, they've won 40 in a row. You don't do that by patchworking a team together.
Certainly an all-star lineup. I'll leave you here with this one just to circle back out to Rutgers now. They've kind of made their mark in the Big Ten in recent years since they joined a couple years ago. Next season's recruiting class is very highly ranked, and they're likely going to have Anthony Ashenall back as long as he's granted a medical redshirt if he's out for the rest of the season. And obviously Nick Gravina is coming back next year with a 6th year of eligibility. On paper, with the new guys and some returning guys, it looks like an easy top 10 team on paper. What do you say to the job Scott Goodell has been able to do with this program over the past decade plus?
Oh, it's I remember when Scott got the job, and it was a run. There was a couple high school coaches that went in to coach college. Kevin Dresser was a high school coach and took the job at Virginia Tech, engaged the local fan base. Steve Martin at my alma mater at Old Dominion took the job after a long career at Great Bridge High School, engaged the fan base. Now they're wrestling at their big arena instead of an intramural gym. Scott Goodale, great reputation in New Jersey. Those Jackson teams were phenomenal. And I was looking this up, and I'm sitting there going, Rutgers was never nationally ranked until 2010, Scott Goodale's watch. 84 weeks they've been ranked in the top 25. 84 weeks since 2010 they've been ranked in the top 25. I knew John Sachi, and I knew that staff when they were at Rutgers. They had good guys. Tom Tanis was the last guy who was an All-American before this regime, and that was 2002. So you look at the numbers of guys on the podium, and you're seeing the influx of programs like Wyoming and South Dakota State and Virginia Tech and Old Dominion that are putting guys on the podium each year. There's more competition for those podium spots, and Rutgers has been one of those teams like, now we're not just looking for one guy a year. We're looking for one, now two, then three, and that's how it builds. Cornell did the same thing. They got their one, then they got their two, and then all of a sudden they're getting 5, 6, and they're ranked in the top 5. Pretty much traditionally. So the job Scott's done, and he's also brought in good coaches with good connections. John Leonardis, great connections within the state of New Jersey. Donnie Pritzlaff, who's one of the greats in the Garden State, and that's a very exclusive group. When you say you're one of the best ever from New Jersey, there's a lot of people to choose from, and he's certainly near the top of that list. So being able to have a good staff, good local ties, keeping the best kids home, and really creating a buzz around Rutgers wrestling because, the last 7 years they've been ranked top 10 in attendance in Division I. That doesn't happen if you don't have success. That doesn't happen if you don't have the buy-in from the state community, and it doesn't happen if you don't have the buy-in from the administration, too. So, props to the administration for saying, all right, we're not going to cut this program. We're not going to demote this program like there was talk about, 10 years ago. We're going to invest in this program, hire some young, energetic coaches that have ties, and really there's – even out here in Minnesota where I live, we hear about Rutgers wrestling out here.
It's certainly good to hear about Rutgers wrestling when we get out of New Jersey. All right, he is Jason Bryant, founder of Mat Talk Online. You can follow him on Twitter at Jason M. Bryant. Jason, we want to thank you tremendously for your time, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, I just have one question for you guys.
Sure.
Is it Taylor ham or is it pork roll?
Oh, of course it's pork roll. Come on. I'm a South Jersey guy. It is obviously pork roll, and I think the majority of the state will agree with me, except for some unnamed colleagues of mine over here at WRSU who are going to call it Taylor ham, but it is in fact pork roll, and you can write that down.
Yeah, I'll mic drop on that one. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Jason.